Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
All right, welcome to Blockchain Show. We've got a special guest today, Sherry Jiang. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me on the show, Ethan.
It's my pleasure. Been looking forward to speaking with you for a while. I think it's probably best if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you've been working on.
Sure. So my name is Sherry. I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Bluejay Finance. We're a crypto fintech that is aiming to democratize access to private markets like private debt, etc. And the way that we're doing it is actually through putting it on chain. So you can think of this as AngelList for private debt, or you can think about it as Goldfinch or Maple Finance, but for the Asia market specifically. So how I guess I got into all of this really comes from my specific background. So I'm originally from the US, actually. I used to work in big tech. I worked at Amazon and then Google for a number of years, and actually ended up moving to Singapore in 2018 with Google to work on the payments market for India. And that's really where I felt a passion for figuring out how technology can be used to accelerate financial inclusion, especially in a emerging market context where you have, at that time, at least most of the people in India being in like a cash-based economy, but really see that transformed in just a period of 3 years into a very digital based economy where a lot of people were starting to use digital payments. And the benefits that came about from that were enormous and still continue to grow. So for instance, India has a very SME or small business driven economy. And so many of them, when they are able to accept transactions in digital payments, now have data that can allow for others to be able to underwrite credit for them to grow their business. So that's where, that's the experience that helped me identify some of the opportunities for fintech innovation. But I also felt like, we were still working with an existing financial infrastructure that was quite legacy in some nature. I mean, you have SWIFT, which is for cross-border, and then you have many instant payment systems that still rely on banking rails, like the traditional banking rails. So any transaction fees, outages, all of that, you're kind of at the mercy, right, of this traditional infrastructure. So that's where I got the inspiration to explore what financial services could look like if they were built on a completely wholly new stack. And that's really where the exploration for Bluejay came about. So throughout my career, no matter if it's in crypto or whether it's in fintech, I've always been really passionate about the overlap between creating more access for the people who haven't had as much access, and new technologies and innovations that can enable that. So happy to talk about anything related to Bluejay or my background or the problem spaces that we see in Asia related to crypto, etc. But just excited to be here.
Awesome. I know you've had an impressive career in big tech companies like Google and Amazon, and I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing what inspired you to transition from these tech giants to the world of decentralized finance.
I got into big tech, I would say, very serendipitously, because the time that I, graduated university, it wasn't necessarily very common for somebody with a business major to get into tech. I actually was in finance for a summer as an intern, and then was covering actually the tech sector. And so that's actually where I got that inspiration in the first place to move into big tech. So I applied and then got a job at Amazon first thing out of school. And that's where I spent time in the marketplace business, which is basically the bread and butter of Amazon. So whatever is basically considered the cash cow generating part. I think that experience was really good in allowing me to see the impact that big tech has, but I was also feeling like the mission alignment with Amazon wasn't quite as there as I wanted it to be. So I moved over to Google because I like how Google really emphasizes the for everyone, part of their mission, right? So they're really there about building. They're really about building billion user products that are applicable for everyday people, expand internet access, things like that. So that spoke to me a lot more, and so I moved over. And then was pretty lucky to end up on a team at Google that was called the Next Billion Users or Emerging Markets. So it was taking the for everyone equation into bring the next billion users online into the internet, coming from emerging markets like Brazil, India, Indonesia, etc. And so this team actually allowed me to work on products that were not the established Google search maps products, but actually really re-envision what these different products can look like from scratch when you take into account the average user who is, living in a very different context in the Western world, right? And so that's what ultimately brought me over to Asia to work on the payments questions specifically. And so I shared a little bit already in my introduction, but that's where I started working on the Indian market, working on payments and fintech there, and just discovering how big the problem space is and the potential that it really has. Now, I guess how I got into crypto for all of this, and what inspired me to venture from what seems like to be a very different background. I think number one is I saw we all know what software did to information. We all know what marketplaces did to traditional industries like cab driving and vacation rentals. I was seeing what DeFi was doing, programmatizing and softwareizing, if you may, the financial industry. And I experienced that firsthand, actually, since the time I interned during the summer in university, and also witnessed it while I was working a few years from the fintech side, that this space is wholly ready for some technological disruption, and to be able to see people spin up financial primitives in just a matter of days or weeks, lending protocols, streaming tokens, etc., was just extremely exciting for me. And so I wanted to combine the experience that I had in understanding how these technologies can help economic development in Asia, combine that together with basically all the innovation that was happening in DeFi. So yeah, that's kind of how I got there. And to be honest, I actually really enjoy the startup or the smaller company environment within crypto more than big tech. I think big tech provides a really good training ground. You are surrounded by very established, very smart people, but it's still a big company. So you have a lot of processes that you have to work through on approvals, etc. So I remember, even during my time at Google, there was a period in time where things got to move a lot faster because our team was much smaller. So you can concept an idea from Monday and then launch it on Friday. But that timeline became 3 weeks, then 3 months. And at a certain point, the bullet points of things I was able to do just thinned. And that's actually was very frustrating for me. Some people might look at the flip side and say, oh, you get to get paid the same and chill. And I'm like, that's not what I want in life, right? Whereas in the world of DeFi, right, the sky is really the limit, right? What you put in is what you get out. And you can move extremely fast in this space. So I really like not just the problem space of DeFi, but also just the environment of, being able to execute and innovate much, much faster.
Yeah. Very cool. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Bluejay Finance aims to provide financial services to underbanked populations in Asia. Could you share with us, how is DeFi breaking barriers? How is it enabling financial inclusion in the region?
Yeah. Absolutely. One thing I'll talk a little bit about is the term underbanked, because I think a lot of people have a conception that if you're underbanked that you must be like disconnected from the internet. You live in a rural village, and there's a huge educational barrier for you to even understand how to use the technology. But actually, underbanked means somebody who just does not receive the same level of financial options as maybe a person who is living in a different country with different sets of regulations, or different options than somebody who perhaps is of a wealthier economic class, right? Underbanked for businesses also means not just your mom and pop shop on the street, but it also means your like 200 million revenue generating mid cap company that cannot get a loan approved by the bank because it's under $100 million, right? Or the bank just doesn't care because it's too small. So underbanked actually encompasses a very wide spectrum, and so with what we do with Bluejay, basically we are creating a platform that connects liquidity on chain, basically investors that are looking for some kind of fixed return or some kind of yield. We connect them with opportunities in Asia to invest, particularly in an asset class called private credit or private debt for different businesses. So let me talk about what inclusion means on both ends of the spectrum here. So on the investor side, typically, if you think about what people can invest in, everyone thinks stocks, bank savings, maybe ETFs, depending on the market that you're in, which is arguably like stocks, but it's just an index fund. Sometimes crypto as well, and then you have maybe treasury bonds, just given the interest rate environment today. But little do people know that there's an entire class of instruments called alternative assets. It's a broad name, but it basically means non-traditional financial assets that are usually closed to private networks or people who qualify as investors to invest in. And these tend to give you sometimes better than market returns, or at least a diversification from just a pure equity type of portfolio construction. So this includes things like private equity, private credit, sometimes quantitative hedge funds. There's a number of different types of assets that belong in here, but typically you don't find out about it unless you're a $500 million AUM institution, or you're ultra high net worth individual with a lot of legacy or a lot of intergenerational money and have $100 million, right, in net worth or higher. So you may know that, but even somebody who is 1 to 5 million in net worth, right, who's a engineer at a big tech company who has investable capital might not know about these instruments, might not be able to get access, but wants to have options to be able to grow their money and achieve their financial goals over a period in time. So how we solve for that is we are able to essentially fractionalize or break into smaller pieces interesting opportunities to invest that people wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. Since most alternatives actually require minimum check sizes, and they can range from 100K to even $5 million, right? So you can imagine how this is wholly out of the scope of what most people can actually invest, right? So we break it down so that we allow for anybody to invest, we allow people to invest any amount. Could be, $10,000, or it could even be $100 to just try out the platform, with hopefully the intention to invest more in the future, right? And we do this in a way that allows you to do it one click through a wallet on chain using stable coins like USDC or Singapore dollar stable coins to invest, and you don't have to create a bunch of different brokerage accounts for all these different providers to be able to access it. So this is something that we're doing on the investor side to open up or create more inclusion for these asset classes. Now on the borrower side, right? Or the origination side, we're also opening up the access for different types of businesses ultimately to get access to credit. So as I alluded to earlier, there's also a ticket size that tends to be very hard to raise for in the Asia markets because banks are very conservative about lending. They don't want to take much risk. And they also don't have the infrastructure set up to take on lots and lots of small loans. And they're not incentivized to. So imagine if you're like a ESG related company doing solar panels in the Philippines, you might have a business model that is more innovative and harder for somebody who's a traditional bank to understand and want to underwrite for, even if there's steady cash flow to be able to use that data to determine whether or not the player is creditworthy. And then also the sizing thing, right? So if you're looking to raise even $20 million, $10 million, it's difficult to get that, get a bank excited about doing it. And this has gotten worse even because of the pullback in bank-related lending just globally, right? This is something that I even saw when I was in Berlin for a conference for finance. Non-bank lending is actually going to increase as an opportunity because of this pullback. Now, this entire credit gap I'm talking about in Asia, just to put a number to it, is actually around $5 trillion. This includes India, South Asia, Southeast Asia, etc. So that's $5 trillion of opportunities that are difficult to get funded because of the way capital allocation works today. So that's why we want to expand the investor base or the capital base that these businesses can get access to, which comes from our ability to distribute to smaller check sizes or to more individuals. And on the flip side, with the investors, now they get access to different asset classes that allow them to flex more options for them to achieve financial goals.
Yeah, wow, that's impressive. Like I think you're right. Like I don't remember how you worded it. Inclusion. I think that's a much better way than saying underbanked. Like I didn't even realize like that can kind of not the best term.
No, it's all good. I think it's not the term that is a bad term by any means. It's just the interpretation of underbanked tends to be the most extreme, and I have to remind everyone that it actually encompasses a really wide range of different levels of like lack of access, right? And any part that you solve is still solving the inclusion equation to an extent.
Yeah, I think, like a lot of people I grew up with, because I grew up in the Midwest of the U.S., and I think a lot of them are still there. And it's like, I wonder what they think of the world. I got to travel a little, and I remember just trying to use an ATM, and there was no English. And I was just like, oh man, I was overwhelmed. But I was also flooded with like compassion because I remember like, this is what it feels like for people in America that don't speak English. It was a long story, but I ended up, making friends, and they helped me get my money out, and like we were like trading cash for their like it was a crazy experience that really I don't know. It's super important, I think, for people to travel. Yeah, I don't know. I was just kind of curious, how you ended up in Asia, or if you want to share, like just kind of why you're focusing on that area.
I would say I ended up in Asia really for a professional and a personal reason. I mean, not to say like there aren't opportunities from where I grew up, but something just drew me to Asia in that it's a place where you still have a much more nascent ecosystem. Right. If you think about, and I'm going to use Southeast Asia as the example because, Asia is huge and, Chinese ecosystem has its own trajectory and everything. But let me talk about Southeast Asia. It's just there's so much opportunity here. It's like in the States, right? I feel like, a lot of if you wanted to work on really cutting edge technologies, you want to work on aerospace, you want to work on B2B SaaS, like monetizable industries, I think it makes a lot of sense. But we're talking about a place where like tech didn't really exist meaningfully until like the mid 2010s. There have been very few unicorns that have been created in Southeast Asia, and people's first access to the internet has been mobile, and many of them in the 2000s had no connection to the internet at all, right? And so you're building like this base base layer, right? Like if you think about a pyramid, I think the Western world's here, and then here is Asia, right? And so the or Southeast Asia. So I think the leapfrogging or the growth potential you have is just enormous, right? So that really attracted me, and I'm not somebody who's afraid of working in a newer ecosystem. I like actually how collaborative it is out here, because we're all like, we're all trying to do our best to push things forward and hopefully make look to someone and be able to feel like we're doing something so that their kid or the next generation like can live a better life, right? And so I think from that perspective, that really drew me to, initially emerging markets in general for my job at Google, but then specifically Southeast Asia as a market. I will also talk about it from a personal perspective, right? So I also grew up in the Midwest. Funny enough, before I moved out to California, I was in a small town outside of Chicago. I think I lived 20 minutes from Michael Jordan, or at least one of his houses. I'm sure that dude has a lot of houses. And it was a very, small, like a great upbringing, but like, kind of a smaller world than, what I've been exposed to later on in my life. And then as I gradually moved to the coast and then moved to Singapore, it really opened my eyes up to just understanding how so many different people around the world live and think. And, to your point about your experience in China, trying to pay and everything, like it creates this like very global level of empathy that like is actually quite difficult to have when you're always in the same environment. So, one thing I'm like extremely grateful for is I probably have friends from 50 different countries in Singapore. I haven't done a count, but sounds about right. And so it's just fascinating just talking to people, asking them about, how they grew up, or tell me about current issues in their country, or what do they perceive of Singapore and like the environment here. So it's just such a, I can't even describe in words fully, but it just feels like there's just new dimensions added to how I understand the world when I actually meet people from different places. And I'm not going to lie, I love to travel too. I am a big, summer weather person. I love the beaches. I love scuba diving. So that's something that's very accessible in Southeast Asia. So I absolutely love that aspect of things. So so initially it really was a professional reason, right? I just really believed in taking a bet on this region, super high growth, still nascent, lots of opportunities. But, personally, there's been many things that has enriched my life that has kept me here year after year after year.
I'm just kind of wondering if, when you travel, when you see trends going on, how do you see blockchain technology and DeFi not only impacting traditional finance, but, is there a possibility for collaboration, or do they have to be separate? Or are they so different?
Yeah, to me, I tell people that I'm in the business of finance. At some point, I think traditional finance and decentralized finance, don't need to have different terminologies. Like that's the world that I want to live in, right? Just like in the past, there was a differentiation between trading and electronic trading, because again, that was, pick up the phone, talk to someone, write down the trade like that. And then electronic trading came about, and then there's that differentiation. And now nobody's like, oh, I work at a electronic trading desk, right? Because like quite honestly, the technology is far superior, right? But the actual fundamental principles of what makes a good trade does not change. And that's how I see DeFi and traditional finance as well. Like the fundamental principles do not change. The same reasons why systems collapse and are overly speculative in traditional finance is the same reason why things collapse in DeFi. But the speed at which things happen, the kind of actors that are there, the technology that is underlying, that's the part that is different. So to me, that's inevitable that these two will have to come together, even if it takes a little bit of time, right? And perhaps this could be a controversial opinion for some, or maybe some really resonate with it. I do think that there will be a part of DeFi that will probably retain its like purest decentralization principles. And that's, I think, fine, right? There's probably a, community of folks that really don't want to touch anything permissioned or touching real world laws or assets or things like that, which I think can create limitations around what you can do there. But if that's what you so choose, I'm sure there are, many people out there that still wish to participate in the economy under those set of rules. But I think the vast majority of the world using DeFi in the future, using DeFi technology, will fall in the latter, which is, they're still doing the same things that they've always wanted to do: borrow money, send money, invest money, but the technology underlying is going to be Ethereum. It's going to be maybe Arbitrum or something else besides Swift. So basically, I do see these worlds coming together, but I do think it's going to take a little bit of time, and I'll tell you why. I think number one, from an institutional perspective, right? And again, vast majority of the world's capital today is actually within the institutional world. They're warming up to crypto and blockchain, but they're not 100% there yet. They're still trying to figure out how to apply the promises of this technology to urgent problems or problems that are very relevant or tangible to them. And I did spend time at this conference in Berlin called Super Return, where I got to actually meet very traditional asset managers and funds just to really understand what they think about blockchain as well. And there's a lot of curiosity, but skepticism, right? They're like, okay, I agree that, eventually we'll get there, but what am I gonna do today to increase my revenue or reduce costs? That's what they care about, right? How is this affecting my bottom line? And I don't think that we have, as an industry, done always a great job at articulating that, right? We go into why it's decentralized, why it's more inclusive, but then why is it more important? Is it you get more revenue because now you have more investors that can invest into your fund because this technology allows you to scale that piece out? Is it, cutting administrative costs of running a fund because now you have a new way to tokenize different risk parameters of your fund so you don't have to set up 10 SPVs or something like that, right? But I think that articulation is just not there in the market as much as I think it could be for people to really understand why I, as a $10 billion plus fund, 4 decades of experience, should care about this new technology. And then on the consumer side, right, I also think that there's a lot of pain, I think, from the bull market. So there are quite a few people that invested in crypto, still equate the industry with crypto assets, right? So if crypto market goes down, that must mean there's no future in crypto, which is, I think, absolutely untrue, right? .com boom bust happened, but come on, the internet is definitely here to stay. So I think that there's still a bit of the negative sentiment from the crashes that happened in 2022. And then I also think that the level of understanding of the space among the average person still could be improved. So, and I tend to try to keep a pulse check on people that are my friends who are not in the industry, right? Just so I'm not in my little bubble. And I have friends from big tech or other tech companies back in the Bay Area that I just talk to about crypto, once in a while. And there are people that are very tech savvy, and some of them are quite financially savvy, and they still do not feel very confident in their knowledge of crypto. So that goes to show that we do have a long ways to go. I think that, yes, we talk about education as this blanket thing. We need more education. But actually, I think people need to just understand what the value is to them, and then they will self-educate if they're motivated, right? People have limited time. They need to know for a business, right? How does this increase my revenues and how does this reduce my costs? And maybe for a consumer, it's how do I make more money while managing my risk? Or how do I be able to save up for a house that I want to buy for a future better when I have the kind of opportunities offered through crypto? And so I think that's where that first step needs to happen. And then, of course, you can go into the educational part of okay, what's a layer 1, what's a layer 2, and all that stuff. But you need to it needs to be very clear to somebody why and why it's important for them to learn about a specific space.
Yeah, definitely important. I often wonder that, because like at the beginning of this show, me and my co-host, we were really trying to push for like mass adoption. Like we thought this was like the greatest thing ever. Like, why aren't people more aware? This was like 2016. We thought like, what's taken so long?
Yeah.
And then I went through like, you mentioned all the like, the crypto markets and it does tend to influence people's opinion, if all they're seeing is headlines or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just curious. Like, I like what you said. Like, if people see the value, they'll seek it out. And I think some individuals are more inclined to do that. But then there's also plenty of people who just, it's not that they don't care. Maybe it's just like, if it makes sense, if it works, if this is running in the background, like this is part of the thing, I don't need to know how a car works. I just need to know that it gets me there. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I actually still think the industry needs its own ChatGPT moment, to be honest, right? Like the beauty of ChatGPT last year was that suddenly a bunch of people finally figured out how they can use AI, right? It's really funny because I worked at Google. So like talking about AI and its potential, like I've been there since like the early, since like 2010s, right? Thinking about AI. And we always talk about the promises. People don't really get it. Like it doesn't resonate. You're like, okay, that's great that you can crunch terabytes and terabytes of data, but like, what does it mean to me? And then suddenly, boom, last year, there's that magic moment where I was like, I mean, for me, like some of the magic moments were as silly as, wow, I can, list ingredients from my fridge and ChatGPT can tell me what cocktail I can make. That was kind of like one of my aha moments. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Or like I'm trying to book a hotel in a city I've never been to before. I give it my budget. I give it a, neighborhood I want to live in. And then I'm like, give me top 5 recommendations. And I was just like amazed by how useful that was. And then it's clear that people now see the relevance of AI to their lives. I don't actually think that crypto has had its ChatGPT moment, to be honest, right? I think it's had its moment in hype, right? I think a lot of people bought NFTs, a lot of people bought, different crypto coins, etc. But like to really feel like, wow, like I cannot live my life without this technology. Like my life has fundamentally changed because of this technology. And I don't want to go back to a world where this doesn't exist. I don't think we've gotten there yet, if I were to be very honest. I want, very, very deeply to get there at some point. And that's why, I'm building what I'm building in this space, right? But I don't think we've gotten there yet. But we will eventually, hopefully together can accomplish that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I tried an experiment 3 or 4 years ago just to do crypto only for a month, just see what it was like. And I'm not gonna lie, it was hard. Los Angeles, there's some places you can, there was a few cafes, a few coffee shops. They had Bitcoin ATMs, but it really made me think like, well, I mean, this is tough. But it doesn't, that's not really what it was designed to do, I don't think. And it's changed a lot. I mean, I've talked to so many people, so many amazing projects in the works. It's always me trying to help them get the word out. You know what I mean? It's never like a friend or someone listening like, hey, you got to interview this person. It's always like, hey, everyone, it's like me. I think you guys should hear about this. And it's like, I always wonder, like, how do you find people to use your product? How do you, like, where's the outreach? I don't know. I just keep wondering, is it just something that's slowly going to take over? Like everything's going to transition into more, blockchain-based solutions, kind of like how internet used to be on the phone lines and now telephone conversations are on the internet,
Yeah, there's I think multiple types of catalysts that really need to be there, right? Now, The reality is, I think the infrastructure does need to be a little bit better. And by infrastructure, I do mean like the layer one, layer two experiences. Like the reason why internet partly became super like proliferated was because a bunch of people actually speculated on that infrastructure back in the day, right? So data became really, really cheap because you had all these people basically laying it in the ground, right? So it became much, much cheaper to be able to provide internet services. I think that's something that's playing out to an extent as well in this space, right? We still don't necessarily have the best experience when it comes to like gas fees or cross chain and all that stuff, right? But again, that's just a baseline. I think it still needs to have a catalyst for adoption. Like, what is it, right? What is it that just gives somebody, like, creates a paradigm shift or like allows someone to like suddenly see, wow, I don't think I can live without this particular use case anymore, right? They red pill to it, right? In a way that like hope, we obviously have from like maybe a earlier stage, but like they truly red pill from an extent of, oh my gosh, this product is so magical, or this experience is so magical that I can't live without it. Yeah, that I don't really have an answer, to be honest, right? I think that's what we're all trying to solve. And once that first piece is there, then the others will come as a result, right?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if you can give us any real world examples or maybe some situations where Bluejay could help, some of these communities that you're talking about, how it can specifically address their specific financial needs. I know you mentioned a few earlier, but I was just wondering if you could go maybe a little deeper on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I'll talk about the investor side, right? Like I spend a lot of time just talking to people about money, right? And then it's not like hey, do you buy crypto or do you not? Like, I'm just like, okay, let's just frame it from like, your own financial life holistically, right? And so when I talk about what we can do, I very rarely bring crypto up first, or I really try not to, especially for a non-crypto audience. I just start asking them like, hey, like, when's the last time you invested in something or made a financial decision? Oh, okay, why did you do that? And what was the goal? And then I kind of dig into like, why they do certain things. And sometimes people will come out and say, oh, I just want to be able to earn a steady return year after year of 10% to 12%, and then be able to double my wealth in a 10-year period, and then, feel like I am able to achieve a level of financial freedom that I want, right? So I kind of tease out like what exactly people's motivations are. And then I'll then ask them like, okay, how do you allocate your portfolio to achieve those goals? And when you're not in crypto, oftentimes your answer for this is it's almost like majority in public equities, right? It's like stocks. It's like, fully exposed to market volatility, right? And then that's where I move into a discussion about portfolio allocation, how, the old models of 60-20 or 60-40 or, stocks and bonds and all of that is actually a little outdated actually, because it doesn't give you the best risk adjusted rate of return. So in some cases, people are like 80% in equities, right? And so, yes, you can maybe over a 40-year period get those returns, but you're trying to have shorter term liquidity timelines, right? So so then I kind of talk about like, I kind of ask them like, would you want to know about like how you can better diversify? And a lot of times people are curious, right? So that's when I start talking about, alternative assets, right? And then if they're very interested, they'll ask, okay, that's great. So how do I find out more? How do I get access? And I was like, you can't today, right? You can't get access because things are not set up in a way for people like you to get that access. If you have $100 million lying around, if you're a well-known family office or institution, you can. But you right now, you can't, except if you work with us, right? So, and then I talk about how our technology allows us to be able to service this to them. So it's a very different way of going about it. Like instead of starting product first and then try to fit a consumer and consumer mindset, I kind of just go with the user. I'm like, all right, let me try to just understand you, right? And then see where like the proposition of what we're doing is going to fit into your goals. Sometimes it won't work, right? Sometimes people are just very uninterested in investing, and in that case, I maybe ask them about their favorite food and the name of their dog. But other times, they are actually very curious because they didn't know what was possible, because most individuals never get marketed these kind of more specialty investment instruments. So yeah, that's one way I would explain it to somebody who is on the ground. Like this is actually what I do, like explain on the ground, like why what we're doing is important, starting with their context. Explaining this to a business is actually a lot easier. Also, you don't have to go with this is in crypto, right? That's not the benefit. I just asked them, what their capital raising experience has been. And it could be some really they'll talk about how it's taken them months pitching to all these institutions, getting their doors shut, worrying about their cash flow because they are not able to actually manage their working capital as well, etc. And then I asked them, okay, how would you feel about being able to tap into $1 million of capital and be able to get that process done end to end in about 3 weeks, right? Versus the multi-month timeline that you have with traditional institutions. And then that's where they're like, okay, tell me more, right? That's the problem that you're trying to solve. And then you explain, okay, we're able to source all this capital from new investors from different places because it's on the blockchain. So I try to start with things that are not related to crypto, start with the user, and then gradually draw them to the conclusion that, oh, this is facilitated on this tech layer, and it makes sense to be facilitated on this tech layer. And I could only access this solution in the same kind of beneficial way if I work with you.
Pretty impressive. Let's just explain it as if I'm a completely ignorant and I'm new to the space. And I would imagine two types of people, someone wanting to make money and somebody wanting to borrow money. What would the procedure be like for each of those people?
Yeah. So procedure for the investor is, I've done this actually. I've actually just sat down and got on a call and walked them through getting a Coinbase account, getting a MetaMask, and doing the whole process of on-ramping. What I found is that people just need hand-holding through the first experience, and then they feel much better about doing it. It's just scary the first time. And then you do it enough times, and you're like, oh, it's just, you can think of it as like funding your brokerage account. Like that can be freaking annoying too, from, banks to, Wealthfront or other accounts, but we're used to doing it. So that I'm just there to help people, like handhold them, right? Once I get them into MetaMask, I think it's the app is very easy to use. It looks like any kind of like asset management platform. You see the opportunities, you click, decide how much you want to invest, approve wallet, boom, you're done, right? So it's so I spent time kind of on onboarding people on the investor side if they haven't really been as comfortable using crypto. On the business side, actually, we at the moment act as an intermediary many times, right? Meaning that they don't actually have to touch crypto for the most part, and that's just temporary for the most part for the time being. But essentially, we help them launch their opportunity on their platform, and then when the capital is raised in crypto, we eventually actually transition that into fiat and send it to them, and vice versa. So they don't really have to take on the exposure at the moment in crypto. I hope that answers the question of like how it works today.
Yeah, for sure. I like what you're saying about education, awareness. I think about people in my life, they just work hard. They work so hard and they're not in a good situation. They just have to keep working. I was just wondering, how people can understand decentralized finance? What efforts are being made to educate people about the benefits and the opportunities in the space, or anything you'd like to see change to help include more people?
Yeah, no, that's a big question. I mean, there's no shortage of content out there that explain the technicalities of how this all works, right? But I think it needs to just be made more relevant to people. And so, like, I always give this example, right? Like, you know, the reason why like people, for example, buy Coca-Cola, right, isn't because there's a bunch of videos that explain like the balance of sugar levels or other ingredients. Like, you don't need to know what goes into Coca-Cola. You just need to know that it tastes freaking good, right? That's the magic moment. And the context to drink Coca-Cola. It's at these like sport events, it's at the World Cup, it's at XYZ. So like now you're like, okay, I know why I like Coca-Cola. It contextualizes it provides an emotion to it, right? You don't give a shit about how Coca-Cola, sorry, my language. You don't care about like what goes into Coca-Cola. Everything goes into talking about what makes Coca-Cola today, I think, in the content that's here. I think that's great for us Coca-Cola producers, right? I'm a producer too of Coca-Cola. I'm a producer in the crypto space, but we're talking about consumers here, right? How do you abstract away all the complexities and make it relevant to them? So I think that's the macro theme of everything I'm saying, but like how this actually plays out, tactically, like there's no one size fits all, right? I think in Asia, for instance, TikTok, social, YouTube is like a very common way for like everyday people to find this information. So you have people creating shorts. And so like maybe it could be like you have like these bite-sized little things of like how I use crypto today to send money to my grandma or something like that, right? Like you just make it so like, oh yeah, I have a grandma that I want to send money to as well, but like how did they do it in a way that's faster so grandma's happy, right? So I think it's a lot of these storytelling elements that are missing in this space. Like everyone likes to talk about how much money they made and feel good about themselves, right? But that's not a very yes, that's nice, and I would like to know how I can make more money, but like, let's be real, like the people that are actually making a lot of money here is a small percentage compared to the ones that can benefit from the technology. So I think that could work in a market like, so some of these bite-sized stories on TikTok, et cetera, could work for Asia. Maybe the US will be different, right? So I don't know if that answers the question, but basically like there needs to be more storytelling, more relevance for people's lives, and then communication channels that reach a mass audience with people that are really relatable talking about some of this stuff.
Yeah, no, I think it's very well said. I was kind of hesitant to ask you this question. I don't know. I've been doing this show a while now, and I don't get the opportunity to talk to many women, and I don't know why. It just doesn't seem like there's as many women in the space. So I was just kind of curious if you could speak to your experience, what's going on.
Yeah, this is always a very complex question, right? And so, I will start out and say that like there's a level of some of the disparities are passed on from the industries that crypto was born out of, right? If you think about what crypto is, it's tech and finance, right? Just look at the tech, and I come from big tech, right? It was very like common for me to be in a room with 10 people in a meeting and I'm the only woman, right? And that was, I think, very jarring for me at first, but I quickly kind of got used to it because I'm like, all right, well, I like tech. I'm not going to let the fact that I'm a woman affect that. So I'm just going to deal with it, right? If you look at finance, it's the same thing. It's in different places, it's a little better. I actually think that in the financial industry in Singapore, for some reason, it's actually a lot more gender balanced than other parts of the world. But when I was, going to a conference in, like I mentioned this already, in Berlin, Oh my gosh, it was actually worse than the crypto conference ratio, if I were to be honest. Like it was maybe like 30-1 or maybe even more, right? So that you're talking about like less than 5%. So there are like legacy ratios, I would say, that affect how that plays out in crypto. Now, I do think that crypto has the opportunity to be more inclusive, right? Because there's fewer people that can say, oh, I've, had 4 decades of experience here, and 4 decades ago, there was even more gender inequality. Therefore, it's a lot more solvable, I think, right? But why is it not really as equal today? I think by and large, it's very, when women see that there's not a lot of other women doing something, they feel like they don't really belong. It's a deeply psychological thing, right? It's even if they're capable, but somehow they're like, oh, if I'm not if someone like me is not reflected there, like I just don't know if I'm gonna fit in. Like I don't know if people will listen to me, or what if there's all these questions that go through your head. And I think for some people that's enough for them to say, I just don't want to be there, right? I think the other part is, this is again going a bit with general observations, but women they do think a lot about money, right? And there's a seminar that I attended actually like years ago with Google called like Women and Money, right? But a lot of times women are treasurers of their family, right? They manage family money. They actually do the budgeting for kids' education, all that. They do think about money, but the context in which they think about money is not so much like, hey, how do I ape into this coin and get 100x? It's actually like, how do I grow my wealth in a sustainable way over a period in time? There's some of those questions that are a little bit different than I would say what I would feel like a man would think, right? Again, generalizations. And the most of the space in the narrative and the language is about the quick wins and about feeling good about gaming it and getting wins, whereas maybe other people like women are more interested in like, okay, like how do I build wealth for myself over time? How do I build wealth for perhaps my family or my future family with this? So I think there's different motivations there as well. But I do think that it's going to change. I mean, I feel like every couple months I go to a conference, I do see more and more women there. To a point where now I think that crypto actually has a better representation sometimes than even the traditional finance sector. So yeah, I mean, I hope that is an okay answer, but I mean, for all the women out there that are interested in this stuff, or maybe are afraid to take the first step, or feel like they don't belong, or they're it's not for them, like it really is, right? There's a crypto should not see gender, right? From that perspective, like it's not a gendered product. It's something that is for everybody, right? But know that it's something that like you can learn about, and there are women that are doing cool things in this space, and there are women you can connect with to learn more. Just take that first step, right? And it won't be as scary afterwards.
Kind of curious, looking ahead, what are your hopes, aspirations for the future of decentralized finance? And, do you envision it transforming the global financial landscape, improving lives of people around the world?
Yeah, I definitely, sort of strongly believe in the future of this. I mean, I think that like how money works fundamentally will change in the next 5 years, and then even more in the next 10 years. Like our children and our grandchildren are not even going to be able to recognize the way that we've been paying today. Like what we're doing today will be so freaking outdated in 50 years. Like, and that's exciting to me, right? But I do think that it's sometimes hard to imagine what that is, and everyone's kind of stuck in status quo because we have like a baseline bias, right? We're always like, okay, like I can't imagine what this future can be because I'm so used to like, I'm so used to like just sucking up and, dealing with the bank rates when I transfer money cross border. And I can go and tell you, like, you don't have to pay those rates right in the future. So I would love for, the level of access to money, the level of understanding of money to just be fundamentally changed because of this, right? Now, I think that, and I would like to see this. I would like to see institutions get disaggregated in a way, right? Just like big box retail, like Macy's or Sears or whatever. They used to be like the owners of what consumers can buy in terms of socks and whatever. And today, like, that's not true at all. Like, if you want to find your own cool direct-to-consumer socks brand, like, there are so many options you could pick on the internet, right? And you can be you can do your own funky sock brand if you want to, and have a market for it. I think that will be something that happens within finance because of DeFi in the future, where like you're going to have smaller, more nimble teams providing financial services that work for smaller audiences so that everyone can kind of have their needs addressed. That is not the case today. Right now, it's like who has the most money servicing the people who have the most money, right? So I really want to see this change. And when that is available, then I think everyone's understanding of money hopefully is better, because when you imagine your ability to access something, right, then that's when you start educating yourself, right? When you see that there's things that are possible, right? So I think over the next few years, or maybe next, I'm trying to pick a time frame that makes sense, but let's just say the decade, right? I do think there'll be there'll be a change in the structure of the financial industry, where you have a lot of small, nimble players that are, able to compete in some ways against the big institutions. I also imagine seeing, things like, cross-border transfers having like 200 to 300 basis points of fees, like just hopefully going away, because we have a financial system where like you don't even have to think about like what country somebody is in. You can just send money and then that's that. Like you remove the national, you remove the border of nations in actually doing commerce, right? You make that money flow just so much more, fluid. I also can imagine people really not actually using banks anymore. Like I know that sounds, well, let me just say banks as in like bank accounts owned by JP Morgan and these banks. I think what Coinbase is doing, by the way, is banking. Well, I think, even you can argue what you do in MetaMask and the extension of those services is actually decentralized banking, right? It is banking, right? You're parking money somewhere with the intention of doing something with it. So I think the ideas of what a bank account is, ideas around where you're storing your money, where you're conducting financial services will change. And not everybody has to rely on traditional bank accounts anymore. Yeah, so those are some of the things that I think will happen, right? But I do think fundamentally the way that we use money is going to change in our lifetimes.
Yeah, that's incredible. Man, I know we've gone over time. I appreciate you. Just want to thank you, give you the opportunity to leave us with anything you'd like to, maybe where people can connect, learn more, or just anything. I just want to give you the floor here.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of things we discussed, but I'm always happy to connect with people. I have a Twitter account at Sherry Jiang. I'm on LinkedIn as well for anyone who's a bit more traditional as well in terms of professional social connection. But I look at my inbox all the time, right? I'm always happy to connect with people. Happy to hear views that they disagree with me on. I love debate, right? That's great. But also if someone, is curious about anything, like I like having a chat. So I've really enjoyed my time here. Certainly interesting discussion, and I like the questions that were asked as well, which focus a lot more around more kind of high level macro thinkings around the space versus, one specific technology or one specific, application. So I just really want to thank you, Ethan, for giving me the opportunity to speak here. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, well, it's been my pleasure, Sherry. Just want to thank you again. I wish you all the best.